All right, it says we're live, but I don't see us live yet, so we're going to wait and make sure that we are live. Oh, there we are. We're lagging. Okay, so we are now live with a broadcast. So welcome to week 5 of our Upgrading SQL Server webinar series. The first 4 weeks, I sort of gave you an overview of things to consider before, during, and after your upgrade. We want to use this time to answer any of your questions. We have a few questions from people ahead of time that I'm going to just pull into my other monitor here, and a couple links to give you as well. The long anticipated, for those of you who've been here the whole time, the long anticipated upgrade checklist is ready for you to take and use and adjust. We'll give you a link for that. And I hear an echo there from Mike. That's all right. And we're good to go. So I have the rest of my team here, and not everybody. Jack and Bruce are not here at the moment, but I wanted to take a moment to introduce people, and I'll introduce them in the way I see them on my screen. So Joe, you are first, and Joe, if you want to tell the world about yourself.
Hi, my name is Joe Fleming. I've been a DBA for about 20 years now, and started consulting a couple of years ago. I do mostly the hardcore DBA stuff, building SQL servers, making sure that they're healthy, backups, restores, building high availability centers, and things like that. So I've got a good deal of experience there, and I also have, well, whether I like it or not, I've been stuck in a lot of replication scenarios, so I've had a lot of experience with that too. So next.
All right, I'll go. I'm Tara Kaiser. I've also been a DBA for about 20 years. My specialties are performance tuning and HADR stuff, high availability and disaster recovery. I'm also pretty fond of upgrades as long as you're upgrading to a more current version. I'm not too fond of upgrading to one of the older versions, but I like to work on the new versions, all the new features. My favorite topic for performance tuning is parameter sniffing. I've lost hundreds of hours of troubleshooting time working on parameter sniffing issues over the years. And I'm not fond of replication, but I too have a lot of experience with it. I'm more fond of switching over to availability groups and the readable secondaries for reporting needs, but that's not always possible.
Great. And the meeting dumped me. Do you hear me okay again?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I missed. Mike, did you introduce yourself?
No, I'm next.
Go for it then.
Yep. Hi, my name is Mike Clark. I'm also, like everyone else on the team, I have 20 years of DBA experience. I'm kind of like these guys, and I'm not very fond of replication. And unlike them, I don't have a lot of experience with replication, but it's something that we do quite well here at Straight Path with Mike and Joe and Tara. But I do like upgrades quite a bit. I've done several of them at large corporations. As long as they're well thought out and well planned and tested, they're very smooth. There's no guarantees. Sometimes there's stuff in the hiding there, but our testing plans and iterative testing helps drive those out so we can have error-free upgrades. I'm looking forward to today's discussions for sure.
Thanks, Mike. And Bruce just joined. So Bruce, I'll let you introduce yourself briefly. Just tell us about who you are and kind of what your role is here at Straight Path.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bruce. I'm the support analyst. I'm the one that sends out your daily checks in the morning from your daily reports.
Perfect. And you do a lot of our SQL installs too, and you actually have done quite a few upgrades. Yeah, or the pieces and parts of them. So thank you. So what we want to do is we wanted to just chat about the upgrade webinar series and just talk about upgrading SQL Server and give a chance for people in the audience to ask questions. And again, we kind of came with some questions. So I think maybe just to kick it off, one of the questions we got is it can open a lot of discussion. We could use the entire webinar probably talking about this. Somebody said, how do I know what version of SQL Server to pick? There's 3 to 4 we could go to. I kind of talked about this a bit in the first 2 webinars, but I'm curious what you think, in the audience. I mean, on the panel here. So, just unmute yourself and cut each other off. I'm curious what you think.
Well, I'd prefer that people upgrade to 2017 if if given a choice. If 2019 were out, then and it had been out for like a month or two, letting other companies play around with it first in production, then I'd be all for that. But I don't think that I would upgrade to 2016 in lieu of 2017. 2017 is pretty rock solid. Might as well get to the latest version that's released.
I would, pardon me, I would agree with Tara there, with the exception of that I would wait longer than a month or two before moving to 2019 were it out. I suppose it would depend somewhat on my tolerance, right? If my entire business was based around the server that I was about to upgrade, then I certainly wouldn't do it if it hadn't been out for at least 6 months, maybe even a year. But otherwise I might ratchet things back a little bit. If it was just running, say an internal SharePoint or something like that, that would be fairly easy to roll back. I might go earlier, like 3 to 6 months. But yeah, 2017 would be the way to go. The changes from 16 were very incremental, but some were fairly significant, including the automatic plan regression and correction that came with Query Store that you can't do with 2016.
Makes sense. Mike, do you have any thoughts, or kind of you a violent agreement, or? Hope you're muted. Now you're not. Nope, you still are. Let's see.
I'll just add that if you can wait for 2019 to come out, Joe mentioned yesterday to us that Microsoft has added the featured availability groups, and if that's something that you wanted to go to, wait for 2019 if you are looking to use availability groups, or already are, because 2019 now offers the when you fail over, the system databases all come along, and that's been a bit of a pain. All these past versions, even when not using availability groups, log shipping, database mirroring, the only one where you got the system databases was a failover cluster instance. So that's a really great new feature of 2019. And like I said, I'm a big HADR person, so that would be a reason for me to wait. If I were on a lower version looking to upgrade, I probably would be waiting for 2019 to come out.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Tara there. If you're thinking that your upgrade is going to be like a year out from now, I would be thinking about doing 2019, just because in addition to that awesome availability group feature, which will allow you to fail over your system databases if that's a thing that you would like to do, you also get a lot of in-memory enhancements for TempDB, which will increase the TempDB throughput very dramatically. And you can get some very interesting improvements if you're using persisted memory devices. Basically, so I attended the SQL Server 2019 Roadshow yesterday and got a information dump on a bunch of this stuff, but the persisted memory devices will allow SQL Server to recognize and completely skip the I/O stack. So it's not going to pretend like it's writing to a disk. For example, if you were to just allocate a large RAM drive or something, it would still have to go through your entire RAM stack, or I'm sorry, your entire I/O stack. But instead, it will treat it just like it's memory and write to it that way.
Sure.
Which is pretty cool.
That's very cool. And the thing I'd add is with one of the things I've noticed is Microsoft, and I don't know and this is just my observation, but the more upgrades we've done, the more I've realized that the deprecated features seem to still be supported more and more. I don't know if that's Microsoft doing it on purpose to make sure people upgrade and give them license money. So there's very few reasons to not go to a later version of SQL. In the worst case scenarios, you can just run your database in compatibility mode. The trick is to use the testing tools, right? So in the upgrade checklist, which I'll put into the chat in a little bit, we talk about the testing and all, and there's Upgrade Advisor, and you can do database builds. In fact, we'll get Jack to do a blog post one of these days about sort of reverse engineering a database with SQL Server database tools. But don't be afraid of the version. I think 2019 makes a lot of sense. I'm still old fashioned because who here in this hangout remembers the index rebuild corruption bug, right? And we still find clients that aren't patched properly for it. So bad things happen sometimes, and I like to wait a little bit of time after the upgrade comes. I don't want to wait 3 years, you know, and some of you have been waiting 15 years for an upgrade. So, so certainly not that long, but you know, a good month, 2 months. Yes. SQL Server 2019 is being tapped. It's being previewed by people right now. It's being used by people. It's a solid platform, and it will be once it's released. But I still like to wait a little bit just to let more worldwide adoption happen. I'm you know, it depends on your industry. You know, bleeding edge is fun. Bloodied edge is also fun, but for the wrong reasons. I noticed there's a question in the chat room. So you know, the question here is from Zyfaz. We can't see it here in the Hangout. I'm actually just watching the YouTube too, which is awkward because of the delay. But they ask, does SQL Server 2017 adopt the aggressive update cadence, or does that start with SQL Server 2019? I'm pretty sure that SQL Server 2017 is still going to be doing service packs and CUs, right, guys? I don't think it's until SQL Server 2019 that we get the lack of service packs. Does anybody know that for sure?
I thought it was 2017 that started, but I could be wrong. I mean, you might be right.
Yeah, we can do a search and find out.
Right. I think a quick search for SQL 2017 Service Pack 1 would probably belie would probably get us the info, just because it's been out for a year and a half, and I guess maybe not a year and a half, but for a while. And if there was going to be a service pack, you'd see one by now.
Yeah,
I just checked. It's just C13, no service pack.
Yeah, so SQL Server 2017 is, thank you. It is where they adopted the new servicing model. Zyfaz. It's I don't know if it's aggressive per se. It's just they're going to be doing CUs, and you know, basically, some people say consider CU 12 to be Service Pack 1, and you know, CU 24 to be Service Pack 2. It's not quite accurate like that, but CUs are important. My stance on CUs used to be, when I was a full-time DBA, I never really applied them. When I was a full-time DBA of 2 or 3 databases, I never really applied them unless I saw something that hurt me. I'm more of a fan, and actually, this is a question we have. Somebody asked about, you know, what do you recommend for upgrades and patches? So I'll kind of get into this because of that question. But I'm curious what everybody else thinks. You know, we have a standard that we're kind of developing here at Straight Path. But you know, I'm curious, Tara, Mike, Joe, Bruce, you know, what do you think about when should somebody release a CU? The day it's out, a week later, or wait to the next CU? I still like to wait till one more CU unless there's some really important fix. I'm just curious what you guys think. And this is germane to conversations we're having internally about our policies anyway. I'll go on mute.
Go ahead.
I for one, am not excited about bleeding edge kind of stuff. So I tend to let someone else do that, unless, of course, we have a bug or we're forced to kind of, you know, patch. But as a normal, just kind of a cadence thing, applying them, I like to be, you know, almost a full CU behind, just so someone else can kind of work through all those bugs that may have been introduced and kind of watch all the chatter about that. So unless I'm actually forced to, and they put a fix in there that targets exactly what an issue that I'm having, that's, you know, I'm doing a CU out of cadence, so to speak, I won't upgrade it unless the client asks me to, before, you know, the next one is out.
All right. So I've been installing CUs for a lot of years since I've been working on SQL Server since SQL Server 4.2.1 is out. But starting with SQL Server 2005 is when I started regularly applying the CUs because of the amount of fixes that were in them. And there were times where there'd be a security hotfix released, and you could get that without a CU. But you know, since we were already applying CUs, you know, we'd have to, you know, continue applying a CU. And I wouldn't be on the latest one if it had just been released, but if it had been out for 3 months and I have a maintenance window to do these installations, and there's not a newer CU to go to, I would apply that. But I'm not bleeding edge as far as when it comes out. I'm not installing it that same month, but I am getting to the latest one on a regular basis. You know, at least twice a year on production, and then the test environments as well.
So my opinion sort of goes back to what happened, or the testing methodology that Microsoft used. It used to be like a service pack was much more thoroughly tested than a cumulative update because they put more time into it. They rolled all the cumulative updates. They made sure everything was good. And so it was a lot more man hours put into testing a service pack, so you could take comfort in that it had gotten more testing and was probably more reliable than a brand new CU that had just come out. But I think nowadays, the amount of testing that's done on each cumulative update is at least, if not exceeding, what they used to do on a service pack. Another little trivia bit that I learned at the roadshow yesterday was that I believe every day, basically every time someone checks something in as a change for SQL Server, something like 300,000 automated tests run, or perhaps it was 300,000 tests a day. But with the containerization of SQL Server and the fast installs and stand-ups that they're able to do, they're doing an extraordinary amount of testing now, even on CUs, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, are released almost monthly now. So going to the latest one pretty much means going to the one that was released a month ago. So I would definitely stay one behind, but and I don't see necessarily a need to do a cumulative update every single month. But if you're going to put one in, I would only go maybe one back, like N-1 is typically where it would stand.
Sure, that's fair. Anybody else have anything else to add to that question? No? Okay. So a couple more questions here that I'll kind of go through and look in the chat window, just make sure there's no new questions. I don't see any. So let me just get the list of questions we have through email. Give me a second to scroll. I had moved it to find the links. Yeah, somebody kind of asked, just talk about when they went. Somebody just asked me, tell me about when they go wrong. And I think each one of us here, not your straight path time, obviously, because we don't have mistakes. No, I'm joking. We allow mistakes here. They happen. Talk about a time when you had an upgrade go bad, and I'll start. I'll talk about one that I actually wasn't involved in, and this actually was straight path. We had a client reach out and ask, we need to upgrade, I think it was like SQL 2012 or 2014 up to 2016. And they asked, can we do it in place? And they have all virtual. We said, well, we really don't like in place. And if you read that really long post that I wrote on Stack Exchange Answer, it's like a Bible all by itself. I just type fast. I'm pretty much against in-place upgrades. And I think if you watch the previous webinar videos, I'm against in-place upgrades. I hate in-place upgrades. Like they make my veins start and my arteries start popping out. So I said, don't do it. Please don't do it. And they did it because they had no choice, and it was a budget thing, and they just didn't have time to build in a server. And 99% of the time, in-place upgrades are like, cool, no problem. They just work. Well, that means 1% of the time, or 5%, or whatever percent of the time, that's more than zero. They don't work. And in this case, it didn't work. And we ended up getting a lot of billable hours out of that, which I didn't like. I'd rather not get extra billable hours to help somebody get out of an emergency. I'd rather keep people on the other side of the emergency than help them walk through it. And basically, we don't know exactly what happened. Either somebody made a mistake, or there was just some weird thing with that OS and the drivers and the SQL instance that was there, and they broke both instances, and we had to do a lot of work. I think I forget actually, because one of the people who helped that client is not on the call, Jack, but I think we ended up just installing new and migrating their databases anyway. So they ended up getting a migration upgrade, but they got a lot of downtime in the process. So, I guess my horror story is in-place upgrades. They're not so bad. They can work really well, but when they go bad, and you have no rollback plan. That's mine. If anybody else, I'd love each of you to kind of just unmute and cut each other off, and somebody goes first.
I'm not a fan of in-place upgrades, so I will not do them. I will not sign up for an in-place upgrade unless it's a test environment and we're okay if things go bad there. But in production, I am not going to do an in-place upgrade, period, end of story. That it is just not going to happen with me being the DBA in charge there. Just too much at stake there. I've been fortunate to have all of my upgrades go successfully, except for one. There was one that was successful that it was such a critical project that we actually flew in Microsoft to be on site in case of problems. And it ended up just being a very lengthy maintenance window, which was planned due to the changes that we were making on top of the upgrade. But that one was successful. The one that wasn't, well, they've all been successful, but the one that I'm thinking of where we had issues was when I wasn't completely in control of things, and when I do an upgrade, and I'm the DBA, I am telling the web ops people or whoever's in charge of the applications to shut everything down, so that when I do the final transaction log backup and restore it onto the upgraded system, that we have all the data changes. And they did that, but they didn't turn everything off. They missed something, and I was checking current activity, letting them know that there are some connections still here. You need to shut those down. And normally on systems, I'll disable those logins to prevent, even if they miss, shutting down IIS somewhere, I'll just disable the logins on the source system to ensure that no data comes through. But at any rate, that didn't happen. And so when we upgraded the system and completed the maintenance window, they realized that they had been letting data in from one server on the old system. And there was no way for them to pull that data across because the order of the data being inserted into the system matters. And so we had already let new data into the new system, so they could not pull that old data in just due to the ordering of the data. So there was data loss of about 10 to 15 minutes, which is not good. So highly recommend that, if you're the person in charge of the upgrade and we're talking about, a DBA doing an upgrade, make sure that absolutely every connection is stopped on the source system, or start disabling logins so that they will start getting login failures, and hopefully their monitoring tools will catch it. It's like, oh yeah, I see all these login failure messages. I must be pointed to the old system still.
And I want to let Joe and Mike talk, or Bruce, whoever wants to, but Tara's point is a great point. I went ahead in the chat here and I put the upgrade checklist link there. Again, it's a free download. Just grab it. We don't want your email address. We don't want money. Just take it and use it and make your environment better. We talk about cutover in there. And again, I can't, in one 20-page checklist document, can't answer every single approach, but hopefully it's a good start for you. And you have to remember, like I always say, DBA is not database administrator, and it's not don't bother asking, as the developers think it is. It's database advocate. Like I want you as a DBA to approach your job as though you are the only person in your company who cares about the data. You're the secret service of the database, and nobody's getting to the database unless they go through you. And you need to make sure, as Tara was reminded in her situation, you need to make sure that the due diligence is done, and then double check it yourself. And in the upgrade checklist, I give you one approach. We kind of wrote up one approach, which is not the only approach, but changing server names, changing IPs, shutting down firewalls. When everybody sets us down, stop SQL and then restart it. Do a row count at the very end, right after your transaction log, and keep that other database around. Those are ways you can help prevent that too. So Joe or Mike or Bruce, any upgrade horror stories that you have?
I don't have an upgrade horror story, but I do have a service pack horror story. And that was, I was applying a service pack on a server that I wasn't terribly familiar with, but service packs are pretty simple, right? It was in an availability group, and I applied the service pack, and everything looked good. Now, the way our strategy was, we were going to apply a service pack on one of the passive nodes and leave it there for about a week to make sure that we didn't encounter any problems before then failing over to it and applying it to our primary node. Basically kind of a phased approach, make sure there's no bugs that are going to cause a problem for our product. And what happened was, after we applied the service pack, suddenly no one could connect to the server. And that meant nobody, not even the dedicated administrator connection. It simply was not allowing any connections in. So I had to do the old trick where you find the SQL Server log location and open up the login notepad to find out that it was trying to upgrade the SSIS catalog database, but failing. And because it couldn't complete that part of the script update, it would not let anyone in. So what I came to find out was that the SSIS catalog database, while it is a system database, you're still allowed to put that in the availability group. So the SSIS catalog was actually read-only on that server because they wanted all of their SSIS packages and all of the catalogs with the definitions of variables and all that sort of stuff to go with the go with the availability group. So it was read-only, so it couldn't be upgraded. And so we had to use some trace flags that prevented the upgrade from working, and basically yank the SSIS catalog out of the availability group just to let the service pack process complete, and then put it back into the availability group afterwards. But after that, we adjusted our process so that before you applied a service pack, you took that database out of the availability group. So it was an interesting and fun problem to track down, and made me pull my hair out quite a bit.
Yeah, planning is important. Like in the webinar and on that checklist, I mentioned, planning is the most important step. How about you, Mike? You got all those great hairs. You must have some horror stories.
Yeah, we had one that the only upgrade that I had that didn't go as smooth as our final phase of testing was. We had 2 data centers. It was SQL. We were upgrading to SQL 2012. No availability groups. We had 4 separate computers, and so we were going from 2008 R2 to 2012. This is in 2013, and so we upgraded the DR. What was the DR site? We ran testing there for about 2 or 3 weeks. Stress testing and all kinds of. It was all new hardware as well. So. And because it was a critical application that, transferred billions of dollars a day, we had Microsoft on the site, and we had technical guys there. We had our TAM was there, who was brand new to our account. Come to find out, we failed over, and we were having pretty bad performance. And so we were there. We flipped over at like 11 o'clock at night, and we were like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. The TAM was actually a former Microsoft developer. And so he was able to kind of pinpoint stuff and get some developers inside of Microsoft working on something. But at 4 o'clock, we actually failed back to the other data center. Now, we were doing SAM replication, so we were able to take all the new changes that were there back to the other site, and came back up in 2008 again. But then a couple weeks later, we applied the patch that the TAM helped develop. Applied it, and we knew the exact test case that was causing it to slow down, and we tested that, proved it was fine. We told upper management that we have the fix for it, we can go back, and 2 weeks later we did. But that's really an advocate for having, basically that was a side-by-side install, and so we were able to actually fail back to our old environment without much problem. And so that was, for a while it was kind of scary, but it turned out to be really smooth.
Nice. How about you, Bruce? You've been doing tech support in various roles for, 20 years or more. Not all of it in SQL, but you must have an upgrade horror story, either from SQL or from your days supporting, the printing press manufacturing industry.
Always expect the unexpected.
Amen.
I think the worst SQL install that I've done so far was because I didn't know a little tidbit of information. There was already an instance installed on the server. We were putting a new install on it, and I had the SQL agent set to not restart. And when I did the install, it stopped the SQL agent. Unbeknownst to me, it was stopping it on both of them, the one that was already running and the one I was installing. And then suddenly we were getting emails that the customers' jobs were failing. I was like, oops.
Yeah, those installs can be tricky. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, the good reminder there is kind of just, just because you're doing something that you think is safe doesn't necessarily mean it is safe. So we have to kind of prepare and assume the worst, right? Yeah. And we get phone calls up from customers all the time who didn't assume the worst and maybe should have, and they got the worst. Nice. So I don't see any more questions in the actual chat room, but there's one question that's kind of it's actually a longer question, and we're getting close to the point where we want to wrap this up anyway, so the recording is not super long. This one is a good one for us to back and forth. Basically, the question is, when we're doing a SQL Server upgrade, how do we know what kind of server to build? So I think what they're getting at is performance, and that's I talked about that a little bit in the webinar. it's part science, reviewing your metrics, and it's part deciding on which way you want to err. I think, do you want to err on the side of performance and not budget, or do you want to err on the side of budget and not performance? I think one thing I'll add, and then I'll let the team kind of beat this one around, is when you're doing a SQL Server upgrade, this is a really good time for you to take stock of what you have. If it's just, we need to do it now, I don't care, upgrade right this very second, well, then you don't have time to plan. But if you have time to thoughtfully plan out your upgrade, you can do some baselines. You can do a health check in your server. I tell people on my upgrade checklist, do a health check before you upgrade. If you call up StraightPath right now and said, hey, I need you guys to help us with an upgrade, I'd say, sure, let's do a SQL Server health check. Let's look and see what you have. And sometimes people say, well, why would you do a health check beforehand? We're getting rid of the server. Because I want to see what you have. I want to see, in a car, most cars, there used to be clutches. For those of you young folks, it's a thing that you can use, but it doesn't matter. There's two pedals in your car for the most part. There's a gas pedal and a brake pedal. And there are things that you can do to press the gas and go faster. And there's a lot of things that you've done wrong in your SQL Server settings that have the brakes on. And you can press the gas pedal all you want with the brakes on, and you'll have some problems. Anyway, it's not going to go as fast as you'd like. So if we look at your settings and say, wow, they have this wrong, they have that wrong, these queries are bad, do we want to build a server to handle your performance metrics as it is today? Or do we want to try and get your performance better and save you money when you upgrade? Because your job as a DBA is not just protect the data, but it's to do it in the most economical way. So I think you have to do a health check and take some baselines. But I'm just curious how you all, have in the past kind of, how StraightPath does it. We do baselines, do health checks. What are some things you look for when you're sort of selecting your future cloud server, VM, or physical server? I'll go on mute.
Go big or go home. So I go bigger. If I'm getting new hardware, I'm going bigger than what I currently have. I've been fortunate for the 3 jobs before I became a consultant that we had dedicated performance load test teams. And so we had, before any type of upgrade, we had production-like hardware in a test environment where we could run a synthetic production load and determine if the hardware that we have is going to be sufficient for an upgrade. And we also were fortunate to work with the vendors and get loaner hardware at times that we could try out and then run the synthetic production load on those. But not every company has that. Obviously, these are going to be larger companies. But the key is, for me, is to go bigger. Systems rarely get smaller as they progress over the years. You're adding more and more data. You need more RAM. You need more processors, and luckily, hardware gets faster as you go along. And just try to get whatever the business can afford to get. Max out that money, because you're probably not going to be upgrading for another 5 years. You're stuck on that hardware for a while. And, some companies are fortunate to be able to replace hardware every 3 years or so, but most companies are not. So get what the biggest hardware you can get. Unless we're talking about a small little database, of course, but I've supported just critical systems with, high performance requirements. So whatever you can afford right now, get that and try to extend that amount, RAM, especially with RAM, max out your RAM. Yeah,
RAM's cheap. Well, we just, what's the thing we tell people, Tara, when they ask us how much? You've got the question. We've talked about recently. What's the best answer when somebody says, how many hours would it take for you to tell me how much memory I need? Like, what's the best answer, Tara?
Well, I mean, as a consultant, do you really want me to bill all those hours to figure out that answer? So I'm going to base my answer on what you currently have. Do you currently have memory pressure? What's your data size? And I'm just probably going to double whatever you currently have, or triple, it just depends. But what you have is currently not sufficient. Yeah. And does your current hardware allow you to add more RAM without replacing the hardware? Max that out.
And memory is cheaper than consulting.
Yes.
Yeah.
That answer is quite a bit of depends, right? Depends on what your stats are telling you. And I'm like Tara, go big or go home, because don't send a boy to do a man's job, kind of thing, right? So it's a matter of you don't want to undersize, because it's if once you're up and running and live. Now with VMs it's a bit different, but Moore's law is on your side, right? So if you kind of can upgrade your hardware. I've been lucky that we've actually upgraded our hardware. At year 2, we're starting to buy new hardware, plan it so it's not out there longer than 3 years. So as our applications are growing and increasing, the hardware was increasing too. We were just under the curve of Moore's law, so we could kind of scale up instead of having a scale out kind of a thing. But yeah, another key thing that Tara mentioned, and I want to reiterate, is you always want to test. Doing stuff live in production. Sometimes people say, and I've worked at startups too. Sometimes they say, well, I'm a startup, and our investors want us to be fast. Well, they want you to be fast. They want you to be available, and they want you to be accurate. And so you have to have some form of testing that you can actually verify. The steps I'm going to do in production, have I proved them out? I mean, just as we've talked in the webinar series, do I have a checklist? Have I followed that checklist? Have I found the weaknesses in that checklist for this particular environment? And then while you're doing that, what are your bottlenecks in production? Does your new hardware solve that bottleneck, and does it add new ones? So the size of the hardware is it's going to depend on your particular application, where your metrics are. So doing a health check ahead of time helps drive that out. Are you starved for threads or CPU or memory, or is your IO just hammered?
Sure. So all makes sense. What do you think, Joey? Anything to add there, or maybe one thing you might want to talk about, if you want a muse to talk about? What about when you have, we're in a cool world. We have physicals, we have virtuals, and we have cloud VMs. Plus, we won't talk about PaaS, not here. That's a whole different webinar series. But we have physicals, virtuals, and cloud VMs. And very few physicals these days. We don't have a lot of bare metal SQL that we see up there. So, what do you think that means that we can do with sizing? I'll let you talk through that one.
So it's interesting because you stole a bit of my intro thunder there, but yeah, what I was going to say is I think it's great for go big or go home when you have physical hardware and I can spend $1,000 and I can double the RAM. When I have to rent that RAM every month, it becomes a completely different conversation, right? So suddenly I went from I'm spending $1,000 and I'm going to have 256 gigs of RAM instead of 128. And that 256 is going to last me for the next 5 years, to, hey, I'm renting that extra RAM at $100 a month for the next 5 years. That payoff is a little bit different, right? And whether or not it's worth it. And the same thing with CPU. You have to look at it. Now, the good thing is in the cloud, you get the flexibility to adjust those up and down. I can go into AWS or Azure and say, well, to start out with, to make sure that I'm not going to have any problems, I'll start out big, and then I'll pull back if I decide that my server's performance isn't needed at that level, right? So it gives you a lot of adjustability there. But an interesting thing to consider, and something we ran into actually with a customer of ours, is you can look at the number of cores that your server has as a raw performance metric, but it's very important to look at the speed of those cores as well, right? If I move from a server with 10 cores that run at 3.5 gigahertz to another server with 20 cores that run at 2.7 gigahertz, I may notice a substantial difference there in single-threaded performance. And we had a customer who noticed exactly that. They migrated from an on-premise server that had very high performance cores into AWS, where the cores were more mid-range. And suddenly, even though they had more horsepower, they're like, hey, some of our queries went from taking 60 seconds to taking 90 seconds. And when we calculated out the amount of gigahertz they were getting, it was exactly like 30% less. So they got a 50% increase in the amount of time that it took. So, and maybe my math is fuzzy there, but in any case, we definitely noticed that the single-threaded performance speed of the cores can matter, especially if you've got processes that run single-threaded and are going to get hit by those. So I like the cloud. I'm a fan of AWS and Azure now, and the flexibility that they give you. But it is important to think, do I need to budget for, a quadruple X large or 32X large server if I'm not really going to need it, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you brought one thing up to remind that you really pointed something out good for me. This is not a cloud talk, so I you all know me. I can ramble forever if you just give me a topic and then walk away and don't tell me you walked away. I'll keep on talking. I know you're all surprised to hear that, but what I've noticed, and I'm just curious, Joe, Tara, Mike, if you've noticed this. I mean, Tara, you've been consulting for 3 years. Joe, before here, you were consulting for a few years. Mike, you were a full-time DBA. So you didn't really have much exposure to the cloud per se as a consultant's perspective, but I'm actually finding people in the cloud are actually much more willing all of a sudden to fix performance problems, because we can say to them, we can fix your performance problems and we can save you N dollars per month if we can go to a lower class. So it's like all of a sudden companies are now there. This is OpEx. This is not capital expense. We don't get to pay for it once and then, depreciate over 55,000 years waiting for our SQL Server 2008 upgrade. So we can make a difference and change your monthly bill right now. I mean, you've done that with a client, or you're in the process of doing that with a client. I've done it with a client. We've done it with other clients as a group. I'm just, what do you guys think about that? Like, have you guys noticed that change in people being willing to let us tune? I know it's not upgrades. So answer that, and then I'll finally wrap this up.
I actually have a client. Am I muted?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. I actually have a client that for peak season, we upgraded their memory. We doubled their memory, and they're literally, their problem went away right away because we just saw it. And so then I continued to tune a couple of queries. And then after the peak was over, the client goes, "Hey, how come my bill went up?" Right? And so they downgraded their memory back to where it was because I said, yeah, I think we took care of the problem with tuning. So they actually downgraded the next month or 2 months after peak, just because they said, and literally, this is a small machine. They went from 16 to 32 gig, and they were concerned of the cost of 32 gig versus 16 because they were being billed monthly.
Yeah, monthly billing was different.
Oh yeah. I mean, it just blew me away because the last servers I built at the company I worked with before here, we went to AWS. We had a terabyte of memory. Yeah. We bought the hard and we bought physical there, right? Just because we needed that big of a footprint. That's what we had to have. Yeah. But to have someone, I said, I'm okay with that. We can do that. It costs, we downgraded their server.
Yeah, go big or go home. I totally agree with Tara, and I love that. And and like, give me how much money you have and spend it on RAM. But in the cloud, that's an expensive monthly fee to get the most RAM you can get in a server. That's gonna that's a big anchor and chain you have to drag around all day long trying to afford it. And I mean, it's expensive. Tuning is something it's not optional anymore, which is good for us because we like query tuning.
Yeah. And I think the accounting has changed that, right? And at some point, I think it's good they're starting to pay attention to that cost, because you can actually maximize your investment. And if you buy a server and it sits there mostly idle, that's kind of rough. You can actually leverage that cost out across many workloads. That's great.
Yeah, I'm curious, Tara, Joe, if you guys have anything to add to that.
The other thing that I would add to that is that it makes it an easier case when you say, hey guys, we're in AWS, we're paying for this server of this size, and it's running SQL 2012. We'll pay the same price if we run SQL 2017, right? We'll get all these new features. It's not going to cost us any more, right? Because our monthly price is going to be the same. It's the same server, but we're going to get all these new features, and we're going to get better performance. And in some cases, for example, like the proposal I wrote about a month ago, I looked and I said, listen, if we take you from your single AWS server that you have now, and we put you on two AWS servers of half the size, which we can get to if we tune you a little bit, you can actually stand up an availability group and have some high availability within AWS for the same price, or actually cheaper than what you pay now for a single server, which was a big selling point, right? So suddenly it's going to be even less because, especially in AWS, when you move up a server tier, you pretty much double what you had before, right? You double the price, you double your cores, you double the RAM, everything goes up. So if I can cut it down, I can save 50%. And when you throw in a machine image on there, like SQL Server, sometimes your prices go down even more. So it's really nice. Agreed.
All right, I don't see anybody else coming off mute. I'm talking slow just to make sure. Oh, Mike just came off mute.
I have one. On the other side of that is like Joe was saying, is you had you're able to change stuff quicker, right? Most of the stuff I've had were kind of large and they were in physical boxes, but now I'm doing a lot more with VMs. One client built, he's on standard edition. He built a VM with 8 cores, but all in one CPU. So he wasn't, so he was only getting half of that. So he said, okay, now have 2 sockets with 4 cores each, and then you'll be able to use it. So they thought they were having 8 cores and so forth. So if and that was before we got on site. So if they can make that adjustment a lot quicker, they don't have to go buy new hardware. They it's an outage and they got to reconfigure the VM and so forth. But there is a little bit more flexibility. So not that we want to be less accurate on our estimates, but if something changes or we don't have enough data, and then we have more data and we can actually give a more accurate picture, then we can adjust it a little bit easier.
Sure. No, that's great.
A much nicer cycle. I
love that. So no new questions came up. We had a couple more in email we didn't get to because we got sidetracked on some interesting conversations instead. So I think we'll probably wrap this up. If you're attending and you had a question that you just wanted to get and I missed it in the chat or something, send us an email. I put in the live stream two links. So if you just go straight past SQL.com, you'll see the upgrade checklist is there. It's free. Just grab it. We also have a SQL Server build checklist that we put in the links that you can just grab and use. Again, take them and adopt them as your own and change them. And we're going to put the video for this online on that page I posted in the link, sort of the wrap up of this series. And then you're not going to hear from us for a couple of weeks in terms of webinars, but the week after the MVP Summit. So in 2 weeks, I'll be gone to the MVP Summit. When I'm back from that, I'm going to start the same Thursday at noon, a new webinar series about high availability DR. And as I'm whiteboarding and writing my content ideas, I'm realizing this might be a few more webinars than the upgrade one, because there's a lot more there. So we'll have another webinar series of me talking about HADR, starting with the beginnings and the basics and building precepts upon precepts, kind of the before, during, after. We'll share all those videos on the blog for free. If we build any checklist or content from that, we'll share that for free as well. Come with your questions, and Thursdays at noon is kind of make a date in your calendar, Eastern, and that's when I'll be doing webinars about topics you care about. I think security is one we really want to talk about, and frankly, I might even do a pause before the HADR and just maybe do a week or two about the importance of backup and sort of making a backup and recovery strategy that's virus proof, hacker proof, and ransomware proof, and DBA proof. Because this can be a dangerous tool right here. Oops, I didn't mean to execute. So anyway, Tara, Mike, Joe, Bruce, thank you so much for being here. Great chatting with you all. Folks in the audience, thank you for being here, and have a good day. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.